Do you know pigs can eat just about anything? Grandpa said, his voice thick with the slow certainty of a man who'd seen too much and forgotten nothing. He leaned against the wooden fence of the pen, eyes squinting toward the lazy swirl of pink and brown bodies rooting through slop with snuffling joy. Vegetables, bones, meat, plastic. Hell, I seen one eat a pair of boots once. He chuckled low in his throat, but there was something behind his laugh, something old and heavy. The pigs grunted, content and unbothered, their wrinkled snouts slick with filth and hunger. They were smarter than they looked, clever eyes glinting under muddy lashes, watching, waiting. Folk don't realize, Grandpa continued. You feed a pig right, it'll remember your voice. Feed it wrong. He tapped a fence post. Well, just don't fall in the pen is all I'm saying. They weren't just animals, Grandpa always said. They were memory's final resting place. A pig'll take what the world throws out, chew it into something unrecognizable, and carry on like it never happened. In that way, he said, pigs were a lot like people, only better at forgetting. Forgetting? Forgetting. Was she forgetting something? No. She was right where she needed to be, normally. The sun slipped gently toward the horizon, casting long golden fingers across the pasture, where the grass shimmered like brushed velvet. The farmhouse stood quiet beneath the spreading arms of an old oak, its windows aglow with the soft amber blush of evening. Horses swished their tails lazily, silhouetted against the light as they grazed in slow, rhythmic peace. Cows dozed near the fence, bellies full, eyes half-lidded with contentment. Chickens murmured among themselves, nesting in the coop with the low clucks of a day well spent. Even the tabby cat, curled like a question mark atop a mound of hay, seemed to sigh with the stillness. The dog, old and faithful, trotted toward the porch, pausing to shake the dust from his coat, before nosing open the screen door and padding inside. It was the kind of evening that settled into your bones, made you forget time, made you think the world had always been like this. Soft, slow, good. Everything was where it should be. Everything except the pigs. No troughs filled. No low snorts in the muck. No familiar squeals rising over the barnyard. The pig pen stood empty, its gate slightly ajar, rusted chain hanging limp. No one spoke of it anymore. Not since that night. And though no one mentioned the silence, it hung in the air heavier than the summer heat, curling around the edges of the piece like a secret best left alone. The English countryside stretched out like a watercolor come to life, rolling green hills quilted with stone walls, hedgerows blooming with foxglove and wild rose, and a soft breeze that smelled faintly of lavender and old earth. Nestled among the ivy-clad hollows, sat a honeystone cottage with a thatched roof, its chimney puffing the last of the day's fire into the pastel sky. Window boxes overflowed with petunias and marigolds, and a robin perched on the weathered fence post sang, as though the evening were his alone to celebrate. Bees droned lazily from flower to flower, and a pair of lambs bleated from the far field, their voices light as dandelion fluff. Inside, warm lamplights spilled through lace curtains, catching dust motes in mid-air like drifting stars. A narrow brook murmured at the edge of the garden, trailing through the meadow with the patience of centuries, and the old willow leaned toward it like a dreaming woman. A tabby cat lay curled on the cottage doorstep, paws tucked neatly under, blinking slowly as if lulled by the quiet rhythm of twilight. The hens had retired to their coop, and the cottage dog gave a final lazy stretch before curling by the hearth inside. Everything was slow, tender, and stitched with the kind of peace that felt eternal. And yet, for all its beauty, not a single pig grunted in the stillness. No sty, no trough, no muddy footprints near the fence. Just the silence where they should have been, as if the land itself had forgotten them, or perhaps had chosen to. A floorboard creaked somewhere upstairs in the cottage, drawing attention from the missing pigs and empty sty to what lay within those honeystone walls. The bed frame protested beneath shifting weight, ancient springs whispering secrets through the quiet farmhouse. The sound mingled with something hushed and vulnerable, a deep throaty whimper quickly smothered by soft feminine laughter. In the dim light of a single oil lamp, his scarred hands looked almost monstrous against her pale skin, hands that had broken earth and bone, now trembling as they traced the constellations of freckles across her shoulders. His fingers, calloused from years of labor, moved with unexpected tenderness, as if touching something holy. Beneath the patchwork quilt, their bodies formed landscapes of shadow and light. Basil's muscled arms encircled Jessica's waist, drawing her closer until her copper hair spilled across his chest like autumn leaves on freshly turned soil. His deep green eyes, forest dark and haunted by things unseen, searched her face with a reverence that bordered on fear. When she lowered her mouth to the hollow of his throat, his breath caught, muscles tensing beneath skin marked by old wounds. Each scar told a story he wouldn't speak aloud, especially not here, not now. Jessica's blue eyes remained downcast, focusing on the pulse point at his neck, the curve of his collarbone, anywhere but meeting his gaze directly. When their eyes did meet by accident, a flush spread across her cheeks, turning her fair skin the color of early dawn. Her shyness only made him pull her closer, one large hand cradling the back of her head, while the other traced circles at the small of her back. She pressed kisses along his jawline, each touch causing his expression to crumble further into something raw and undefended. His body, built for violence, for work, for endurance, surrendered completely to her gentle assault. When her fingers found the raised scar tissue along his ribs, he shuddered, not from pain but from the care with which she mapped his broken places. Their limbs tangled beneath sheets, dampened by exertion, and night air seeping through the cottage windows. Her nightdress had ridden up, bunched around her hips, while his chest remained bare, rising and falling with increasingly ragged breaths. Though her movements maintained a certain hesitancy, something urgent lived in the way her fingers dug into his shoulders, in how she arched against him when his hand found the curve of her waist. The cottage creaked around them, old timbers settling as if sighing. Outside, the night had deepened, stars pricking through velvet darkness. No animal sounds disturbed their sanctuary, no grunting of pigs, no shuffling in straw. Just the whisper of skin against skin, the catch of breath, the language of bodies speaking what words couldn't. Behind Jessica's gentle demeanor lurked something desperate, something that made her grip tighter, something that betrayed her calm exterior. She laid her head against his chest, her copper hair fanning across his skin like autumn leaves on freshly turned soil. "I thought I'd never be able to come back here," she whispered, her voice carrying that distinctive lilt. Cotswolds softened by Atlantic shores, English roses blooming in gentle soil. This cottage, these hills. She traced the outline of a particularly jagged scar that ran from his collarbone to his shoulder. "I was terrified, Wilbur. Properly terrified." His heart quickened beneath her ear. "You're the brave one," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the settling of the old cottage. I just thought..." His words trailed off as his fingers tangled themselves in her hair, gentle despite their roughness. "You just thought, what?" Jessica propped herself up on one elbow, her eyes catching the lamplight. The corner of her mouth quirked upward. Wilbur looked away, finding sudden fascination with the ancient ceiling beams. A flush crept up his neck, disappearing into his stubbled jawline. "Just thought everyone deserves to make peace with their ghosts, is all." His thumb absently stroked the small of her back. "Even the ones with hooves." She laughed softly, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "My knight in tatter jumpers." Her finger traced the outline of his jaw. "Rescuing broken birds and wounded women with equal dedication." "You're not wounded," he protested, finally meeting her gaze. "You're the strongest person I know," says the man who wrestled a bloody great mastiff away from a porcupine. She touched the cluster of small, puckered scars that dotted his forearm. "How many quills was it again?" 47, he mumbled, the color in his cheeks deepening. "It wasn't anything special. The dog was scared is all." 47 quills, 3 stitches and a tetanus shot, Jessica corrected, pressing her lips to each tiny scar. "And you still went back the next day to make sure the porcupine hadn't been injured." Wilbur shifted uncomfortably under her praise, his hands finding sudden purpose in smoothing the wrinkles from the quilt. "Dad would have just shot them both. Cleaner that way, he always said." "Your father shot a great many things," Jessica said, her voice cooling slightly, "and mounted their heads on every available wall." Wilbur added with a grimace, "Used to have nightmares about those glass eyes watching me." She settled back against his chest, her fingers idly tracing patterns between his scars. "Do you ever miss Long Island?" "The sanctuary sometimes. The animals." His arms tightened around her. The rest of it? No. His voice caught on something sharp and hidden. Nothing worth remembering there except you. A distant thump from downstairs made Jessica stiffen against him. Her fingers halted their gentle exploration, fingernails suddenly digging into his skin. Wilbur's breathing stopped for one heartbeat, too, as they both strained to listen through the cottage's midnight quiet. Something dragged across the floorboards below, a wet, heavy sound like a sodden carpet being pulled across wood. The scrape paused, followed by a soft, snuffling grunt that raised goosebumps along Jessica's arms. Wilbur's hand found hers beneath the quilt, squeezing once, hard. His body had transformed beneath her, no longer yielding and tender, but coiled tight as a spring. The muscles in his jaw worked silently as another thud vibrated through the floorboards, closer to the stairs now. The doors were locked, Jessica whispered, her lips barely moving. I checked them myself. His eyes fixed on the bedroom door, unblinking. Windows? Latched? Her voice had shrunk to the barest thread of sound. The stairs creaked. Third from the bottom, the one that always complained under any weight heavier than the tabby cat. Jessica's breath stuttered in her chest, as Wilbur slowly, silently extricated himself from her embrace. His feet touched the cold floor without a sound, his hand already reaching for the cricket bat propped against the nightstand. Another creak, fifth stair now, then the seventh. Something ascending with deliberate, unhurried steps. A wet snort echoed in the stairwell, followed by the distinctive click of hooves on wood. Jessica's mouth formed a silent no as she clutched the quilt to her chest. Wilbur positioned himself between the bed and the door. Cricket bat raised, his naked torso gleaming with sweat despite the sunset's chill. His scars stood out like pale roads across his skin, mapping territories of old pain. The floorboard outside their bedroom door whined under shifting weight. A heavy body leaned against the wood, making the hinges strain. The brass doorknob turned slowly, clockwise, catching on the lock before rattling with impatient force. They can't open doors, Wilbur breathed, though his white-knuckled grip on the bat suggested otherwise. They're just animals. Jessica's eyes never left the door as she whispered back. Grandpa always said they were smarter than they looked. The rattling stopped. For 3 heartbeats, silence reclaimed the cottage. Then came a sound that froze the blood in their veins, not the grunt of a pig, but the distinct hollow tap of knuckles against wood. 3 measured knocks, as deliberate as a funeral march. A voice, thick with phlegm yet unmistakably human, rasped through the keyhole. Jessica? Be a dear and unlock the door. It's getting rather cold out in the hall. The cricket bat wavered in Wilbur's hands. Jessica's throat constricted, her lungs burning as she held her breath. That voice, honeyed and rough like whiskey poured over gravel, belonged to a man 3 years dead. Grandpa? The word escaped her lips before she could trap it behind her teeth. A wet chuckle seeped through the crack beneath the door, followed by something that might have been a sob or a wheeze. The very same, Poppet. Though I admit I've seen better days. A pause, punctuated by a sound like mud squelching between bare toes. Your grandmother's quite cross with me for tracking filth through her clean house. Jessica's eyes met Wilbur's, hers wide with terror, his narrowed with suspicion. The bat remained raised between them and whatever waited in the hallway. My grandmother's been dead for 11 years, Jessica said, each word falling from her mouth like stones. Another wet chuckle, this one sliding into something that resembled a pig's satisfied grunt. Oh, we're all dead out here, Poppet. Some of us just have the good manners to stay buried. Wilbur took a step toward the door, floorboards betraying him with a creak. The thing in the hallway snuffled excitedly, something heavy thumping against the wood. You've brought a friend, Grandpa's voice exclaimed, delight dripping like congealed fat from each syllable. How lovely. The more the merrier, as your grandmother always says. A pause. Said. Tenses get tricky when you're mostly digested. Jessica slid from the bed, nightdress clinging to sweat-slicked skin as she moved to Wilbur's side. Her hand found his elbow, steadying him as much as herself. What do you want? Wilbur's voice emerged stronger than he felt, the cricket bat solid in his grip. Want? The words stretched like taffy, considering. Funny thing to ask a dead man. I suppose I want what anyone wants after they've been eaten alive by their own livestock. The doorknob rattled again, more insistently. A proper family reunion. Jessica's fingers dug into Wilbur's arm as memories cascaded behind her eyes. The empty pig pen, the rusted chain, the silence that hung over the farm that summer she turned 12. The summer Grandpa went missing. The summer they sold the pigs to a slaughterhouse 2 counties over. Her father insisting they'd gone feral. "You're not my grandfather," she whispered, voice steadier than her legs. "My grandfather was a kind man who told stories and taught me to fish. I'm still that, I really am," the voice faltered, suddenly cut short as the door slowly opened with a small groan. No figure stood in the doorway. No grandfather, reanimated or otherwise. Just a pig, an utterly ordinary pink-skinned farm pig, with bristly hairs and a wet snout. It didn't lumber in or charge, it simply poked its head through the gap, front hooves planted firmly on the threshold, as if respecting some invisible boundary. The cricket bat trembled in Wilbur's grip. His throat worked silently, struggling to reconcile the mundane animal with the voice that had just been speaking to them. The pig's ears twitched once, catching some distant sound, but its gaze remained fixed, unblinking, unwavering. What struck Jessica first wasn't the impossibility of its presence. There hadn't been pigs on this property since she was 12. But the eyes. They weren't the small, clever eyes of a normal hog. They were wide and round, the whites showing all around the iris in a way that looked obscenely human. Those eyes, bloodshot and yellowing at the edges, stared directly at her with such focused intensity that she felt pinned against the wall like a butterfly in a collection. No oinking, no snuffling, no movement. Just those eyes, reflecting the lamplight with an intelligence that made Wilbur's skin crawl. The voice had stopped completely. The only sound in the room was their shallow breathing and the distant tick of the mantel clock downstairs. The silence stretched between them, like an elastic band pulled to breaking point. A silence so profound it seemed to have physical weight, pressing against their eardrums. Wilbur, ever the caretaker, lowered his bat by slow degrees. His shoulders relaxed a fraction as he studied the animal. Just a pig, he told himself. Just a pig that had wandered in from a neighboring farm. A pig that had somehow opened a locked door. A pig that stared with human eyes. "Hey there, little fellow," he whispered, his voice barely disturbing the thick silence. He crouched slightly, extending one scarred hand palm up in a gesture of peace. "Where'd you come from, him? Are you lost?" The pig didn't blink, didn't twitch. Its wet snout remained perfectly still, not even a quiver of breath visible in the lamplight. "It's okay," Wilbur continued, his gentle tone at odds with the tension vibrating through the room. He took a tentative step forward. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The pig's gaze slid past him as if he were made of glass. Those unblinking eyes remained fixed on Jessica, who stood frozen beside the bed, her knuckles white against the iron bedpost. Her face had drained of all color, lips bloodless, freckles standing out like flecks of rust against paper. She didn't speak, couldn't speak, as if Jessica knew something Wilbur didn't. Recognition flickered across her face, not surprise, but confirmation of something dreaded, something expected. The pig's head tilted at an impossible angle, neck bending until its ear nearly touched its shoulder. Then, without warning, its hind legs began to move, not forward, but backward, hooves sliding across the wooden floor with a sound like wet chalk on slate. Its body didn't turn. Its eyes never left Jessica's face. It simply retreated, one impossible step at a time, backing through the doorway with the precision of something following invisible tracks. Wilbur's breath caught in his throat as he watched the creature's unnatural retreat. Its trotters made soft tapping sounds against the stairs, tap, 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 descending backward without stumbling, without hesitation. The sound grew fainter as it reached the ground floor, but the rhythm never faltered. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, cricket bat hanging forgotten at his side. "What the hell was—" "Shh." Jessica's finger pressed against his lips, her touch ice cold. Her eyes never left the empty doorway, tracking something he couldn't see. The muscles in her throat worked silently, counting each tap as the pig retreated through the cottage. The front door creaked open. They heard it clearly from upstairs, then clicked shut with gentle finality. Wilbur broke from her grip and rushed to the window, parting the lace curtains with trembling fingers. Sunset had painted the countryside in bruised oranges and purples, the last gasp of daylight bleeding across the horizon. And there, silhouetted against the dying sun, the pig continued its backward journey down the garden path. Its body remained rigid, facing the cottage, eyes somehow still visible even at this distance. 2 pinpricks of reflected light staring back at the window. At him. Something cold and heavy settled in Wilbur's stomach as he watched the creature retreat across the meadow, maintaining its backward gait with mechanical precision. No animal moved like that, no living thing. His fingers clutched the windowsill, until his knuckles blanched white. The pig grew smaller against the sunset, a dark shape moving away yet still watching, always watching. It should have disappeared into the hedgerow by now, should have been swallowed by distance, but somehow it remained visible, a black cutout against flame-colored sky. "It's still looking at me," he whispered, voice raw. "How can it still be looking at me?" Behind him a sharp clap shattered the silence. Wilbur spun around, cricket bat instinctively raised, to find Jessica standing in the center of the room, hands pressed together, face transformed by a bright, brittle smile. "Tea," she announced, voice pitched too high, too cheerful. "I can make us some tea." Wilbur stared at her, bat lowering by slow degrees. "Tea? Did we just see the same thing?" She closed the curtain with a swift, decisive motion, her fingers lingering on the lace, as though sealing away something unspeakable. The fabric fell between Wilbur and the window like a veil drawn over a corpse's face, final, necessary. Her lips found his cheek, cool and dry, the kiss lasting just a heartbeat too long to be casual. "Come downstairs," she whispered against his skin, fingers interlacing with his. Her hands were steady now, steadier than they should have been. "I'll put the kettle on." Wilbur allowed himself to be led, one foot after another, his cricket bat abandoned against the dresser. Jessica moved with the careful precision of a sleepwalker, each step measured as they descended the creaking stairs. "Must have been a stray from the Hendersons' farm," she said, voice light as dandelion fluff. "Remember how I mentioned the kitchen door sticks in the heat? We probably didn't close it properly." Her laugh sounded like glass breaking in slow motion. "It probably smelled the leftover shepherd's pie. Pigs can eat just about anything, you know." The words hung between them, stolen from her grandfather's mouth, and repurposed like ill-fitting clothes on a scarecrow. Wilbur's eyes softened with something more complex than concern, a mixture of tenderness and dread that made the corners of his mouth turn downward. The cricket bat's absence left his hands unoccupied, useless. They flexed at his sides, seeking purpose. Jessica's face had regained its color, but something wasn't right in the 2 bright eyes, the too wide smile. She'd retreated somewhere behind that expression, somewhere he couldn't follow. He'd seen this look before, when her mother called, when certain names were mentioned at dinner parties, when thunderstorms rolled in from the east. That helpless, haunted look that silently begged, "Don't ask. Please don't ask." Words formed and dissolved on his tongue, questions that needed asking. His throat constricted around them, swallowing them back down where they sat like stones in his stomach. A lifetime of stepping carefully around others' pain had trained him too well. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Don't poke at things that ain't your business, boy." "Jess," he managed finally, voice gentle as rainfall. His hand found her cheek, thumb brushing across freckles that stood out like cinnamon against porcelain. "If something's wrong, if there's something you need to tell me, I'm here. But I won't pressure you." The lie tasted bitter. He should pressure her. He should demand answers about backward walking pigs and voices from beyond the grave. He should grab her by the shoulders and shake the truth loose from wherever she'd buried it. Instead, his touch remained feather-light, his voice soft, his concern wrapped in politeness sharp enough to cut them both. Should have looked her in the eyes and said, "Tell me what the hell is happening." But something in her fragility stopped him, the way porcelain could shatter if handled too roughly. His gentleness was a curse sometimes. They descended the stairs together, Wilbur's bare feet catching splinters from the ancient wood. The kitchen door gaped open to the night, hinges whispering in the breeze, a perfect rectangular void of darkness. The threshold seemed to vibrate with something unseen, as if the border between inside and outside had become permeable, uncertain. "Just a sick animal," he murmured, though wind didn't turn doorknobs or walk backward. "Probably." Jessica moved past him with eerie calm, pulling the door shut with one fluid motion. The latch clicked. Her fingers moved to the deadbolt, twisting it with practiced precision, then to another lock he'd never noticed before, a sliding brass mechanism near the doorframe's top, and another, a hook and eye at the bottom, and yet another, something that resembled a boat cleat bolted to the wall, around which she wrapped a leather strap. 5 locks. 6. 7. Each one engaged with the methodical certainty of ritual. Wilbur's mouth went dry. "Jess? When did you install all those?" "They've always been here." Her voice floated back to him, disconnected somehow from her busy hands. Grandpa was thorough about security. Another lock clicked into place, especially after the incident. What incident? The question escaped before he could catch it. Her shoulders stiffened momentarily, then relaxed. She turned to him with that same brittle smile. "Kitchen, tea, go." He retreated to the kitchen, bare feet silent on the cold tiles. The cottage suddenly felt less quaint, its ancient beams less charming than oppressive. From the hallway came the sound of more latches being tested, more bolts being thrown. The kettle sat on the stove like a sentinel. Wilbur filled it with water, hands working automatically while his mind raced through impossible explanations. His eyes caught on a mixing bowl in the dish rack. A sudden desperate urge to create normalcy seized him. "I could whip up some muffins," he called out, voice too loud in the quiet kitchen. "Blueberry maybe. Or those lemon ones you like. I know we don't have all the proper equipment here, but I'm pretty good at improvising. Remember that time in your flat when the power went out and I made pancakes over a candle?" Jessica appeared in the doorway, her copper hair catching the light like fresh blood. "That's sweet. But the tea first." She glided past him, taking the kettle from his hands. "Your throat sounded raw earlier. When you were enjoying yourself upstairs." Her eyebrow arched suggestively as she placed the kettle on the burner. "All that groaning and carrying on. Must have been quite the strain on your poor vocal cords." Heat rushed to Wilbur's face, coloring his cheeks and ears crimson. His hand instinctively reached for his throat, fingers brushing against stubbled skin. I didn't," he stammered, then paused, brow furrowing. His throat felt perfectly normal. No rawness, no strain, not even the slightest tickle. He swallowed experimentally. Nothing. Smooth as silk. Jessica busied herself with tea preparations, her back to him, as she reached into a wooden cabinet, adorned with hand-painted herbs. Her fingers danced over various jars and tins before selecting 3, each unlabeled, each containing something that looked more suited to a witch's cauldron than a proper English tea. "Chamomile for calming," she murmured, measuring dried flowers into a strainer. "Licorice root for throat protection. And just a pinch of valerian to help us sleep after." She glanced over her shoulder, that brittle smile flickering across her lips. After our unexpected visitor, the kettle began to whistle, its cry building from a whisper to a scream. Jessica silenced it with practiced efficiency, pouring steaming water over the herbs. The kitchen filled with fragrant steam that curled like ghostly fingers around the exposed beams. "My mother was really quite extraordinary with plants," she continued, stirring the brew with a silver spoon. "Could identify any herb by scent alone. Could tell you exactly what each one did to the body, healing or otherwise." Her voice took on a dreamy quality, as if reciting from memory rather than engaging in conversation. "Foxglove for the heart, but too much stops it completely. Belladonna for the eyes, but the line between dilation and death is paper thin." She turned to face him, copper hair haloed by steam, eyes reflecting the kitchen's warm light. "I followed in her footsteps, you know. Studied herbal medicine at university." Her chin lifted slightly, pride straightening her spine. "One and only valedictorian of my class, by the way." The pride in her voice felt genuine, a glimpse of the Jessica he knew, brilliant, accomplished, slightly smug about her academic prowess. Wilbur's tense shoulders relaxed a fraction as he leaned against the counter, warmth blooming in his chest that had nothing to do with tea. "Hey," he said softly, affection rounding the edges of his words, "we can't all be as smart as you. Some of us peaked at can identify most farm animals without a picture book." Jessica's laugh bubbled up, unexpected and real. She crossed the space between them, teacups momentarily forgotten, and pressed her forehead against his chest. But you always bested me in the heart department. Wilbur's arms encircled her without hesitation, pulling her close against him. The tension melted from his shoulders as he rested his chin atop her copper hair. Where their bodies touched, warmth bloomed between them like sunlight through stained glass. The kitchen walls seemed to exhale around them, the ancient timber relaxing its vigilance. Lamplight pooled across the tile floor, honey gold and rich, casting their entwined shadows as one elongated shape against the far wall. The kettle's dying whisper faded to comfortable silence. Jessica's fingers traced the constellation of scars across his chest, no longer mapping wounds but connecting stars. You see straight through me, she murmured against his skin. Always have. His laugh rumbled through his chest, vibrating against her cheek. Says the woman who diagnosed my appendicitis before I even felt pain. That was just medical training. She tilted her face up to his, freckles dancing across her nose as she smiled. What you do is different. You see the scared parts I hide from everyone else, and you don't run away. Wilbur's thumb brushed her cheekbone, his calloused skin catching slightly on the softness there. Nothing about you scares me. The lie hung between them, sweet and necessary. They both knew what they'd seen upstairs, what they'd heard, but in this golden moment, suspended in amber light, those impossibilities seemed distant, dreamlike. The teacups steamed forgotten on the counter, as Jessica rose on tiptoes to press her lips to his. The kiss tasted of chamomile and promises neither could keep. His hands settled at her waist, fingers splaying across the small of her back, drawing her closer until the boundaries between them blurred like watercolors. I think, she whispered against his mouth, we should take our tea upstairs. The tea can wait, he murmured back, his voice thick with something more urgent than thirst. Jessica's laugh sparkled between them, bright as wind chimes. Patience, farm boy. Good things come to those who... A wet thud against the kitchen window cut her words short. They froze, still entangled, suddenly aware of the darkness pressing against the glass. Outside, night had fallen completely. The sunset's final embers were supposed to be long extinguished. The window reflected their embracing figures, ghost-like and transparent against the void beyond. Probably just a moth, Wilbur offered, though they both knew moths didn't make sounds like wet clay dropping onto stone. Jessica nodded too quickly, her smile tightening at the corners. Of course. Just a moth? Neither moved toward the window to check. Neither suggested turning on the exterior light. Instead, they remained locked in their embrace, a tableau of forced domesticity with terror lapping at its edges. The sound came again, a wet, sliding thump that traveled through the glass and settled in their bones. Jessica's fingers dug into Wilbur's arms, her nails leaving crescent moons in his flesh. Neither spoke as a shadow passed across the window, too large for a moth, too deliberate for anything that should be prowling the English countryside at night. Wilbur's protective instincts surged through his veins like electricity. He gently disentangled himself from Jessica's embrace, placing himself between her and the window in one fluid motion. The floorboards creaked beneath his shifting weight, ancient wood protesting as if warning him to stay put, to remain in the golden circle of lamplight where monsters couldn't reach. Stay here, he whispered, the words barely disturbing the air between them. Jessica's hand shot out, catching his wrist in a grip so tight he felt bones grind together. Don't. Her voice cracked on that single syllable, revealing depths of terror he'd never heard from her before. Please, Wilbur. Don't look. But curiosity, that ancient fatal human flaw, had already sunk its hooks into him. He moved toward the window with the slow inevitability of a sleepwalker, drawn by the need to know, to see, to understand what lurked beyond the fragile barrier of glass. The kitchen light transformed the window into a mirror, reflecting his approach. Pale skin, tousled hair, eyes wide with apprehension. Behind that reflection lay darkness absolute, a void that seemed to breathe against the pain. As he drew closer, his reflection grew sharper, hiding whatever waited outside. His fingers found the light switch. One flick, and the kitchen plunged into darkness. The mirror became a window. The garden beyond lay bathed in moonlight, silver blue, and still. The herb beds Jessica had lovingly planted that morning stood in neat rows. The stone path wound its way toward the gate. The old oak tree spread massive limbs against the star-speckled sky. And there, directly before the window, stood not one pig but 7. arranged in a perfect semicircle, facing the cottage. They stood motionless, unnaturally still, their pink bodies luminous in the moonlight. No rooting, no snuffling, no twitching of ears or tails. Just 7 pairs of eyes reflecting the starlight like polished coins. Wilbur's breath fogged the glass, obscuring the view for one blessed moment. When it cleared, the pigs had drawn closer, not by walking, but as if the space between them and the house had simply compressed. They stood at the window box now, hooves planted among Jessica's marigolds, snouts almost touching the glass. One pig, larger than the others, raised its front trotter. The movement was wrong, too precise, too articulated. The leg bent at an angle impossible for porcine anatomy, the foot splaying into something that resembled fingers. The hoof dug into the soft earth of the window box, crushing Jessica's marigolds. Wilbur held his breath, unable to look away as the pig's leg moved with horrifying deliberation, not scratching randomly like an animal might, but writing, its trotter carved through soil with the precision of a pen on paper, gouging deep furrows that revealed darker earth beneath. The first letter emerged, a wobbly, imperfect t. Wilbur blinked, certain his eyes were playing tricks, but the letter remained, unmistakable in the moonlight. The pig's unblinking eyes never left his face as its hoof continued its grisly work, carving a second letter beside the first. From this angle, with the moonlight casting everything in silver blue shadow, Wilbur couldn't make out what followed the pig's body blocked his view, its bulk obscuring its own terrible handiwork. He found himself leaning closer, forehead nearly touching the glass, straining to see what 3-letter message was being etched into the garden soil. "They've brought friends," Jessica's voice came from directly behind him, eerily calm. She'd moved without making a sound, suddenly at his shoulder like she'd materialized from the darkness itself. How lovely! Her hand settled on his back, fingers splaying across his bare skin, each fingertip ice-cold against his warmth. The contrast made him shiver, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the pig's methodical writing. "There ice no food here," Jessica suddenly shouted, her voice so loud in the quiet kitchen that Wilbur flinched. The words reverberated against the glass, making it vibrate beneath his fingertips. "No food. Nothing for you." The largest pig paused in its writing, head tilting at that impossible angle again. Its jaw worked silently, as if chewing on her words, considering them. Then it resumed its task, completing the 3rd letter with deliberate care. Jessica pressed against Wilbur's side, her body molding to his, as if trying to merge with him completely. Her arms snaked around his waist, fingers digging into his hip with desperate strength. Through the thin fabric of her nightdress, he could feel her heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic, terrified rhythm that belied her outwardly calm demeanor. "Come away from the window," she whispered, voice steady despite the trembling of her body. "Please, Wilbur, come away." He couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even blink as he watched the pig's hoof complete its gruesome calligraphy. The 3 letters stood stark against the dark soil, but from this angle, with the moonlight casting everything in deceptive shadow, he still couldn't read what had been written. Jessica tugged at him, her grip so tight it would leave bruises. She pulled with the strength of pure terror, wrapping herself around him like a second skin. Her arms encircled his waist, fingertips pressing into his flesh as if anchoring him to this world. To her. She buried her face against his shoulder blade, copper hair spilling across his back. "Please," she whispered against his skin, her breath warm and desperate. "Don't look anymore." The raw need in her voice finally broke through his trance. Wilbur allowed himself to be guided backward, step by reluctant step, away from the window and whatever message had been carved in the soil. Jessica's body trembled against his, yet her movements remained controlled, deliberate, like someone who had practiced this particular retreat many times before. She maneuvered him toward the kitchen table without ever breaking contact, her body molded to his back, arms still wrapped tight around his middle. Only when his legs bumped against a chair did she finally loosen her grip, and even then, her fingertips lingered on his skin, as if afraid he might evaporate if she let go completely. "Sit," she murmured, pressing gently on his shoulders. "Let me take care of you." Wilbur sank into the chair, legs suddenly boneless. The kitchen light flickered back on. Jessica must have hit the switch, though he hadn't noticed her move. In the warm glow, the window became a mirror again, reflecting their pale faces and hiding whatever horrors waited in the garden. Jessica's hands moved with practiced efficiency, reaching for the teacups she'd prepared earlier. Her fingers trembled slightly, betraying the calm mask she wore. She brought a steaming cup to Wilbur, setting it before him with ceremonial precision. "Drink," she said, voice honeyed and soft. "You're shaking." Was he? Wilbur looked down at his hands, surprised to find them trembling against the wooden tabletop. Shock, he thought distantly. Just shock. Anyone would be shaken after seeing ... after seeing. The memory of the pig's writing seemed to blur at the edges, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. 3 letters. Something important, but his mind skittered away from it, refusing to bring the image into focus. Jessica knelt before him, taking his hands in hers and guiding them to the teacup. Her touch was gentle yet insistent, wrapping his fingers around the warm ceramic. She didn't release him even then, her hands cradling his, stabilizing the cup as she raised it toward his lips. "You look so stressed," she whispered, her eyes searching his face with unbearable tenderness. "This will help. Chamomile. Valerian. My special blend." Her body pressed against his knees, her face upturned and pleading. In the lamplight, her skin glowed golden, freckles dancing across her cheeks like constellations across the midnight sky of her skin. "Please." She nuzzled him, her nose brushing his collarbone, her lips soft against his throat. There was nothing calculated in the gesture, just raw tenderness that made his heart constrict. Her body curved into his with a desperate softness, every point of contact between them a silent plea. She held him like he might dissolve into mist at any moment, like her arms alone could anchor him to this world, to her. The teacup warmed his palms as Jessica's fingers traced circles on his wrists, her eyes never leaving his face. She was breathing too quickly, her chest rising and falling in short, anxious bursts that belied her outward calm. The smell of the tea rose between them, herbal, sweet, with an underlying bitterness that hadn't been present in their previous cups. Something clicked in Wilbur's mind, a thought crystallizing with terrible clarity. He stared down at the amber liquid, watching it catch the lamplight. It looked so inviting, so normal, the same tea they'd shared countless mornings across countless breakfasts. Warm, comforting, yummy, even. Tea. The 3-letter word surfaced in his consciousness, bringing with it the image of hooves carving soil. T-E-A. What the pig had written. Not a coincidence, not possible. Wilbur's fingers curled around the cup, not lifting it to his lips but simply holding it, feeling its weight. His face remained soft, open. No accusation hardened his features, no anger tightened his jaw. Only a gentle hurt bloomed across his expression. A confusion so genuine it made Jessica's breath catch. "Jessica," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Polite even now, unfailingly gentle. "What did you put in my tea?" The question hung between them, delicate as spun glass. Jessica's hands froze against his wrists, her fingers pressing briefly into his pulse points before withdrawing. The kitchen seemed to contract around them, the walls leaning in to listen. "Just herbs," she said, too quickly. Her eyes darted to the window, then back to his face. "For sleeping, for the nightmares. You've been tossing and turning, calling out." "I don't have nightmares," Wilbur interrupted, still gentle, still soft. "Not since I was a child." Jessica's smile fractured at the edges, a hairline crack spreading across porcelain. "Everyone has nightmares. You just don't remember yours." Her hand reached for the teacup, trying to guide it toward his lips. "It's just chamomile and valerian. Trust me. I'm trying to help, like you helped your grandfather." The words escaped before he could catch them, rising from some deep place of instinct rather than thought. Wilbur didn't know where they came from or what they meant, but the effect was immediate and devastating. Jessica recoiled as if struck, her body folding in on itself like a wounded animal. The teacup slipped from her fingers, amber liquid splashing across the floor in a constellation of droplets. Her face drained of color, freckles standing stark against bloodless skin. "I'm sorry," Wilbur said quickly, reaching for her hands. "I didn't mean that. I don't even know what I meant." Jessica's eyes fixed on a point beyond his shoulder, pupils dilated to black pools that swallowed the blue. When she spoke, her voice emerged hollow, detached, as if calling from the bottom of a well. Do you know how hard it is? Her fingers trembled in his grasp, cold as river stones, to just exist like a normal person? A single tear traced the curve of her cheek, hanging suspended at her jawline before dropping onto their entwined hands. The dampness spread between their skin like a pact. You wake up and brush your teeth and make coffee, and pretend you don't see things moving in the corner of your vision. Her laugh emerged fractured, brittle as thin ice. You smile at the grocery clerk while calculating exactly how many sleeping pills it would take to never wake up. Wilbur's throat constricted around words that wouldn't come. He could only watch as Jessica's composure crumbled, revealing something raw and wounded beneath. Being yourself, truly yourself, is so lonely it hollows you out. Her gaze drifted to the window, where darkness pressed against glass. But trying to be stable, to be what they call well-adjusted, it never lasts. The cracks always show. Her fingernails dug crescents into his palms, not to hurt but to anchor herself. And you, Wilbur, you're so good, so genuinely kind. You rescue injured birds, and remember how I take my coffee and listen when I talk about books you'll never read. She pulled away suddenly, wrapping her arms around herself. And I keep destroying everything I touch, ruining everything beautiful. The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting momentary shadows across her face that made her features shift and distort. In that half-second of darkness, something else seemed to peer through her eyes, something ancient and hungry. I didn't mean to hurt Grandpa, she whispered, voice dropping to a register that raised goosebumps along Wilbur's arms. He was just asking too many questions, about Mother's garden, about the special tea. Her fingers worked anxiously at the hem of her nightdress, twisting fabric until it threatened to tear. The pigs weren't supposed to find him. The shed was locked. The ground was frozen solid. The words tumbled faster now, a confession without absolution. But they smelled him anyway. Dug him up, started eating before I could stop them. She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears that caught the flickering light like tiny desperate stars. They've developed a taste for it now, she whispered, her voice cracking as her fingers curled into the fabric of her nightgown. Human flesh. They can smell it miles away. They follow me, always follow me, no matter where I go. A shudder rippled through her body, violent enough that Wilbur could see the muscles spasm beneath her skin. Her shoulders hunched forward as she wrapped her arms around her middle, as if trying to contain something struggling to escape. But that's not the worst part, she continued, her voice dropping to a register so low Wilbur had to lean forward to hear. The worst is what's inside me. Her hands pressed against her abdomen, fingers splayed across the thin cotton of her nightdress. In the kitchen's amber light, Wilbur could see something moving beneath the fabric, a subtle shifting, like water rippling under ice. Jessica's skin seemed to stretch and contract in places where no human body should be able to move. They're swimming, she whispered, eyes wide and unfocused as she stared down at her own body. Always swimming, inside me, little ones at first, but they grow. Wilbur's hand reached for hers, but she flinched away, pressing herself against the kitchen counter. The sudden movement sent a teacup crashing to the floor, porcelain shattering into a constellation of white shards. Don't touch me when they're active, she hissed. Then her face softened into something desperate and pleading. I don't want to hurt you. Not you. As Wilbur watched, frozen in horrified fascination, a visible ripple traveled across Jessica's stomach. Something pressing outward from within, testing the boundaries of her flesh. Her back arched suddenly, a gasp tearing from her throat as she clutched the counter's edge for support. I throw them up sometimes, she said, words tumbling out between ragged breaths. In the bathroom, when you're asleep, little pink things squirming and squealing. I flush them away, but they always come back, growing inside me again by morning. She looked up at him, copper hair falling across her face in tangled waves. Some days I wake up, and I'm not sure if I'm Jessica anymore. My bones feel wrong, soft and shifting. My thoughts get tangled up with pig thoughts, rooting, feeding, hungering. Her hand reached out tentatively, fingertips ghosting across Wilbur's cheek with such tenderness it made his heart contract. But then there's you, she whispered, wonder softening her features. When I'm with you, they get quiet. When you hold me, I can feel my bones staying solid, staying human. Another ripple moved across her abdomen, but gentler this time, as if the creatures within were settling, calming at Wilbur's proximity. Jessica's fingers traced the movement with something like wonder. "It's different with you," she whispered, her voice steadying. "I stay, me, for longer stretches. Sometimes whole days pass where I don't feel them swimming." Her eyes found his, desperate for understanding. "Before you, I'd wake with blood under my fingernails and no memory of the night. But now," her hand pressed flat against her stomach where the movement had stilled completely, "now I don't even feel hungry when I think about you." A broken laugh escaped her lips. "That has to mean something, doesn't it? That the part of me that's not me doesn't want to devour you." She crossed the kitchen in 3 swift steps, closing the distance between them. Her hands found his face, cradling it with painful tenderness, fingertips trembling against his skin. "I only feel normal around you. Safe. Human." Her thumbs brushed his cheekbones, mapping the contours of his face like a blind woman memorizing her lover's features. "Like a palm tree in a hurricane. Everything chaos around me, but where you stand, there's stillness." Her forehead pressed against his, copper hair falling like a curtain around their faces, creating a private world of whispered confessions. Her breath hitched on a sob. "Please don't leave me," she murmured, the words barely disturbing the air between them. "I couldn't bear it. I'd unravel completely, go insane, more insane." Her fingers tightened against his skin. Not enough to hurt, but enough to convey desperation. The things inside me would take over. There'd be nothing left of Jessica. Tears spilled down her cheeks, catching in the hollow of her throat. "I did what you wanted, didn't I? Came back to this cottage even though I knew they'd find me here. That's why I left for America in the first place." Her voice cracked on the admission. "Pigs aren't the fastest swimmers. It took them time to follow. I had months of peace before the first one washed ashore in Long Island." She pulled back just enough to meet his gaze, her eyes wide and pleading. "I promise you won't notice anything strange after tonight. This is the last episode. I have it under control now." Her thumb traced the outline of his lower lip, touch feather light. "I'll be what you need. Do anything you want. We never have to talk about this again." Wilbur remained motionless, his expression unreadable as Jessica's words poured over him. His silence seemed to fuel her desperation, each passing second without response driving her further into frantic bargaining. "I'll burn sage every morning, salt under the windowsills, iron nails in the doorframe. I'll do everything right this time, I swear." Jessica's words tumbled out faster, more desperate with each passing moment of Wilbur's silence. She clutched at his shoulders, fingernails digging crescents into his skin. A thud against the window shattered the moment between them. Then another, and another. The glass vibrated with increasing force as something outside hurled itself against the barrier, not trying to break through, but demanding attention. The thuds formed a rhythm now, deliberate as a heartbeat. Wilbur's eyes finally moved past Jessica to the window, where 7 pink snouts pressed against the glass, fogging it with their breath. Behind them the night sky had changed, no longer velvet black scattered with stars, but a sickly greenish purple, like a day-old bruise. The moon hung bloated and yellow, closer to the earth than any moon should be. "Don't look at them," Jessica whispered, trying to turn his face back to hers. "Look at me. Only me." But Wilbur's attention remained fixed on the window, where one pig, the largest, had reared up on its hind legs. Its front trotters pressed against the glass, not as hooves but as hands, fingers splayed, thumbs opposing, unnervingly human. Its mouth worked silently, forming words Wilbur couldn't hear but somehow understood. "Come out. We're hungry." Jessica's body went rigid against him, her spine straightening with a series of small wet pops that sounded nothing like human vertebrae should. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, deeper, rougher, with a wet, phlegmy quality that made Wilbur's skin crawl. "I tried to protect you," she said, her head tilting at that same impossible angle he'd seen in the pig upstairs. "I really did." Her hands fell away from his face, dropping to her sides where they hung limp and strange, fingers twitching in small, spasmodic movements. When she took a step backward, her body moved wrong, joints bending in directions that human anatomy shouldn't allow. "They always find me," she continued, her voice sliding between Jessica's familiar English lilt and something older, darker. No matter where I go. No matter how many locks. Another step backward. Another series of wet pops from her spine. Her nightdress rippled across her abdomen as something shifted beneath the fabric. Not a subtle movement now, but violent, purposeful. The cotton strained, threads stretching to accommodate whatever grew beneath. I thought this time would be different. A sob caught in her throat, briefly bringing Jessica's voice back to the surface, before it submerged again beneath that wet, guttural tone. With you. Because of how you made me feel. Her hands rose to her face, fingers pressing against her cheeks, her jaw, her throat. Not caressing but exploring, as if her nails were checking for something beneath the skin, for weak points in a mask that no longer fit quite right. Her fingers dug deeper, pressing hard enough to leave white marks that bloomed red at the edges. It hurts, she whispered. And Wilbur couldn't tell if it was Jessica speaking, or whatever lived inside her. It always hurts when they get impatient. Outside, the pigs pressed harder against the glass, their bodies no longer entirely porcine, limbs elongating, spines straightening, snouts flattening into something resembling human faces stretched over porcine skulls. Their eyes remained the same though, too knowing, too aware. Wilbur found his voice at last, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. Jessica, please. Let me help you. Her laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep and dark, a sound like mud boiling. Help me. Oh, Wilbur. Her hand moved to her stomach, fingers splaying across the writhing fabric. You already have. The nightdress tore with a sudden violent rip as something pushed through, not a hand or a foot, but a small, pink snout, glistening wet and quivering as it tasted air for the first time. Jessica's face contorted in agony as the creature inside her struggled to emerge, her body bending double with the effort of containing it. I'm sorry, she gasped, blood speckling her lips as she spoke. I'm so sorry. I tried to warn you with the tea. It would have been gentle, painless. Another snout pushed through the torn fabric, then another, tiny piglets squirming their way from Jessica's body into the kitchen's warm light. They hit the floor with wet, meaty thuds, their bodies slick with blood and something darker. Run, Jessica managed, her voice momentarily her own again, desperate, terrified. Please, Wilbur. Run now. But his legs wouldn't move. His body remained frozen in horrified fascination, as Jessica's form continued its grotesque transformation. Her skin rippled and stretched, bones cracking audibly as they rearranged themselves beneath. Her copper hair fell away in clumps, revealing pink, bristled skin beneath. Her face, that beautiful freckled face he'd traced with his fingertips, began to elongate, nose and mouth merging into something that was neither human nor pig, but some terrible hybrid of both. The creatures that had emerged from her body grew with impossible speed, their limbs lengthening, bodies swelling until they were no longer piglets but fully grown pigs, their eyes fixed on Wilbur with terrible hunger. Outside, the window finally shattered inward, raining glass across the kitchen floor as the 7 pigs from the garden pushed their way into the cottage. They moved with unnatural coordination, surrounding Wilbur in a perfect circle, their bodies transforming as they closed in. Standing upright on elongated legs, trotters morphing into grasping, misshapen hands. They surrounded him, these nightmare creatures, closing in with the patient certainty of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. The thing that had been Jessica stood before him, her transformation nearly complete. Copper hair clung in patches to pink, bristled skin. Her nightdress hung in tatters from a body that was neither fully human, nor entirely porcine. Her jaw had extended, teeth lengthening into yellowed tusks that jutted from her lower lip. Only her eyes remained unchanged, those familiar blue eyes, now swimming with tears, watching him from within a monstrous face. A low keening sound escaped her transformed throat, not a pig's squeal, but not human speech either. Something caught between worlds, between forms. The sound carried such profound anguish that it pierced through Wilbur's paralysis, reaching into his chest to squeeze his heart with icy fingers. The other pigs paused in their advance, heads tilting in unison as if awaiting a signal. The air in the kitchen thickened, charged with anticipation. Every instinct screamed at Wilbur to flee, to scramble backward, to put as much distance as possible between himself and these abominations. But Wilbur didn't run. Something deeper than fear held him in place. Something that recognized the sorrow in those unchanged blue eyes. He took a breath, then another. His heart hammered against his ribs as he forced his right foot forward, then his left. Step by deliberate step, he crossed the kitchen toward the thing that had been Jessica. The surrounding pigs shifted uneasily, uncertain how to respond to this deviation from the script. Their misshapen hands flexed, clawed fingers grasping at empty air. Wilbur stood before the Jessica creature now, close enough to smell the copper tang of blood, and something earthier, more primal. Her transformed body trembled, muscles rippling beneath bristled skin, as if fighting against itself. Those human eyes widened in confusion, in disbelief, as Wilbur slowly raised his arms. He wrapped them around her monstrous form, pulling her against his chest with gentle firmness. Her body was hot to the touch, fever-warm and slick, with something he chose not to identify. The bristles scratched against his bare skin, but he didn't flinch away. Instead, he tightened his embrace, one hand moving to cradle the back of her misshapen head. "It's okay," he whispered against what had once been her ear. "I've got you, Jess. I've got you." The Jessica creature went rigid in his arms, her transformed body vibrating with tension. A sound like rusted machinery emerged from her elongated throat, confused, questioning. The surrounding pigs shuffled backward, their movements uncertain for the first time. "I'm not going anywhere," Wilbur continued, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. His arms tightened around her transforming body, refusing to recoil even as bristles scratched his bare chest raw. The Jessica creature convulsed against him, her jaw working frantically as if trying to form words. What emerged instead was a high, keening oink ah that vibrated through her throat with painful effort. The sound was horrifying, a pig's squeal wrapped around the ghost of a human voice, like someone drowning in their own transformation. Her blue eyes widened in panic as she tried again, lips stretching over elongated teeth. "Hr oink ooh." The noise tore from her throat, desperate and pleading. Tears leaked from her human eyes, tracking down bristled cheeks in glistening rivulets. Her misshapen hands clutched at Wilbur's shoulders, clawed fingers digging into his skin as she struggled to communicate. "Shh, it's okay," Wilbur whispered, cradling her transformed head against his chest. "You don't need to speak." "I understand." The surrounding pigs shifted uneasily, their circle loosening as they exchanged glances with two intelligent eyes. Something in Wilbur's gentle acceptance had disrupted their ritual, thrown uncertainty into their hunger. One by one, they sank back onto all fours, their half-transformed bodies quivering as if caught between states. Jessica made another attempt, her breath hot against Wilbur's collarbone. "Oink oink bruh." The sound approximated his name, mangled but recognizable in its intention. Her clawed hand rose to touch his face with excruciating gentleness, careful not to break his skin. "I'm here," he murmured, turning his face into her touch without hesitation. "I'm not afraid of you, Jess." The lie tasted like copper on his tongue. He was terrified, his heart hammering so violently he felt lightheaded, his muscles coiled tight with the primal urge to flee, but beneath that fear ran something stronger. Something that recognized the frightened woman trapped within this monstrous form. "Hrr oink, srre." The sound broke into a series of wet, choking sobs, as Jessica buried her elongated face against his neck. Her transformed body shuddered with each breath, bristles rising and falling across pink skin. Wilbur stroked her back, fingers navigating the strange topography of her changed form. "It's not your fault," he whispered into what remained of her ear. "None of this is your fault." The piglets that had emerged from her body huddled together near the shattered window, their growth halted at adolescent size. Their eyes, unnaturally intelligent and watching, tracked his every movement with collective hunger. Jessica's body convulsed again, more violently this time. Her spine arched backward at an impossible angle, vertebrae cracking like gunshots in the quiet kitchen. Her transformed hands clutched at Wilbur's shoulders, claws drawing blood that ran in warm rivulets down his chest. The pain barely registered as he held her tighter, refusing to let go even as her body fought against itself. "Stay with me," he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. "Find yourself in there, Jess. I know you're still in there." A shudder passed through her body, not the violent spasms of transformation, but something different, something intentional. Her breathing slowed, becoming more measured. The bristles beneath Wilbur's fingers softened, not quite returning to human skin but losing their rigid sharpness. The tusks receded slightly, no longer jutting past her lips. "Wilbur?" she managed, the word mangled but unmistakable. Her blue eyes locked with his, suddenly clear and present. "Kill me. Please." Wilbur's embrace tightened, his scarred hands pressing her against him, as if he could physically prevent her from slipping away. "Never," he whispered fiercely. "I'm not giving up on you." The surrounding pigs began to pace, agitation visible in their jerky movements. Their hunger was palpable, a living thing that filled the kitchen with its presence. But something held them back. Some invisible barrier created by Wilbur's unflinching embrace of their transformed kin. Jessica's body trembled against his, caught between forms, neither fully human nor completely monstrous. When she spoke again, her voice emerged stronger, though still distorted. "Can't stop it. Been fighting so long." "Then stop fighting," Wilbur said, the words surprising even himself. His hands framed her transformed face, thumbs brushing across bristled cheeks with tender reverence. "Stop fighting it, Jess." Confusion clouded her blue eyes. "But, monster." "No," Wilbur said firmly. "Not to me. Never to me." His lips pressed against her elongated snout without hesitation, a kiss as gentle and reverent as any they'd shared before. The bristles scratched his skin, the unfamiliar shape pressed against his mouth, but he didn't pull away. In that moment, he chose to see beyond the monstrous form to the woman trapped within, the brilliant, damaged, beautiful woman who had carved out a place in his heart. Something shifted in the air, a subtle change in pressure, in atmosphere. The surrounding pigs froze in their pacing, heads tilting in unison, as if listening to some sound beyond human hearing. Jessica's body went rigid in Wilbur's arms, every muscle tensing at once. Then, impossibly, she began to change again. The bristles softened beneath Wilbur's touch, pink skin fading to pale cream, freckles blooming like constellations across the landscape of her transforming face. Her jaw contracted with a series of wet clicks, tusks retracting into normal human teeth. Copper hair sprouted from her scalp in wild, uneven patches, growing rapidly until it cascaded across her shoulders in familiar waves. The transformation rippled through her body, bones shifting, muscles realigning, organs settling back into human configuration. Each change brought a whimper of pain from Jessica's throat, but Wilbur held her steady through every agonizing moment, his arms a sanctuary against the storm of her metamorphosis. The surrounding pigs retreated, backing toward the shattered window with uncertain steps. Their half-transformed bodies shimmered in the moonlight, features blurring as if seen through heat waves. One by one, they slipped out into the night, their departure marked only by the soft padding of hooves against wet earth. Jessica collapsed against Wilbur's chest, her body fully human once more. Her nightdress hung in tatters around her trembling form, skin slick with sweat and something darker that Wilbur chose not to examine too closely. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each inhalation shuddering through her newly reformed lungs. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, the words muffled against his skin. Her fingers, human fingers, nails broken and beds darkened with soil, clutched at his arms with desperate strength. "I'm so sorry. I never meant, I couldn't stop. I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Tears streamed down her face, carving clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. Her body convulsed with each sob, shoulders shaking as years of horror and guilt poured out of her in a torrent of grief. "I love you," she whispered between broken sobs, the words fragmented by her gasping breaths. "I love you so much it hurts. I thought I could protect you from this, from me. But I couldn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Wilbur gathered her closer, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other traced soothing circles against her spine. His touch remained gentle despite the scratches that stung across his chest, despite the blood drying in tacky rivulets down his skin. "Listen to me," he said, voice low and steady as a heartbeat. His fingers threaded through her tangled copper hair, working through knots with patient care. "You are not a monster. You are Jessica Harlow, who cries at dog food commercials and alphabetizes her spice rack." A broken laugh escaped her lips, catching on a sob halfway through. Her hands pressed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palms, as if to reassure herself of his solidity, his realness. You are the woman who rescued that three-legged cat everyone said was too feral to save, Wilbur continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. You're the woman who knows the Latin name for every plant in your garden and who hums Beatles songs while you wash your hair. His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears that continued to fall. The moonlight streaming through the broken window caught in her copper hair, transforming it to liquid fire that spilled across his forearms. In this light, with her skin still feverish from transformation, she almost glowed, ethereal and impossibly human all at once. You're not defined by what lives inside you, he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. Or by what your grandfather did to you. Or what you did to him. His fingers traced the constellations of freckles across her cheeks, mapping stars he'd memorized over countless mornings. You're defined by how you keep trying, even when it would be easier to give up. Jessica's breath hitched, her eyes searching his face with desperate hope. How can you still look at me like that? After what you've seen? Because I see you, Wilbur said simply. All of you. The broken parts and the beautiful ones. He kissed her then. A soft, reverent press of lips against her tear-stained mouth. She tasted of salt and copper, and something wild that lived beneath her skin, something that would always be there, waiting. He kissed her anyway, without hesitation or disgust. I love you, he whispered against her lips, the words hanging in the air between them like a fragile newborn thing. I love your brilliance and your darkness. I love your freckles and your scars. I love the way you fight every day to be more than what was done to you. A sob caught in Jessica's throat, her hands clutching his face as if to memorize its contours. Even knowing what I am, what I've done. Especially knowing, Wilbur said, his voice steady as bedrock. Because I've seen your monsters, Jess, and I'm still here. I'm not running. Something shifted in her eyes, a clearing, like clouds parting after a storm. Her body relaxed against his, tension draining from her muscles, as if his words had unlocked something long clenched tight within her. I love you, he repeated, each word deliberate and weighted with truth. Every part. Even the parts that scare you. Outside, the night had grown quiet. No scratching at windows. No wet thuds against walls. The pigs had retreated into the darkness, their hunger temporarily sated by whatever communion had passed between Jessica and Wilbur. They would return, they always returned, but tonight, in this fragile moment of peace, they had granted a reprieve.